Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday evening session with Janice and Brian. Today we're going to discuss a little bit about the financial aspects of African Americans and where we were and where we are now, which is very little difference in the economy with African Americans. As we know, Black Americans take up about 1% of the economy, less than one half really of the economy, the financial economy in America, which is supposed to be the nation's largest wealth place. So with that being said, I'm going to let Brian give you a little bit of the history of that, and then we will open it up and we will talk more at lib about, where we are now versus where we could be and where we need to be.
Mm-hmm. All right, so whenever we think about economics, the number one thing that comes to mind first is finances. So whenever we deal with finances, we have to look at the origin of finances as it relates to African American people in general. Mm-hmm. What actually made us, I guess you would say, important part of the United States equation for creating wealth. How was our labor used in order to create that wealth? And then what was the distribution of that wealth as it relates to us as African people? So when we look at the history, we have to go back to the days of our ancestors when labor was free.
Free, right.
And economically, the slaves were not compensated for their labor. So essentially, there was no way for them to actually build wealth. There was no way for them to actually create an economic base that would support the community. So whenever we're talking about wealth, when we're talking about economics, we're talking about a base to support and sustain a community. Unfortunately, we put in all the labor, but our ancestors were not compensated for the labor that they put in. So it left us economically depleted. It left us in a state of financial ruin because we had nothing to start with.
Right.
So we were starting basically from ground zero to try to build and establish a financial base so that it could support a community, sustain a community, mm-hmm. and we were starting with zero funds to do that.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the equalizer, the great equalizer that never happened. Mm. One of the ideas as it relates to establishing African people after the Civil War, General William Sherman issued Special Order 15. Special Order 15 would cover Georgia, would cover that Atlantic coast, mm-hmm. South Carolina down to Florida. What that special general order stated was that all of the Africans that were willing to stay in those areas were to be issued 40 acres. Here's where we get our 40 acres in a mule concept
yes.
from. Okay, were to be issued 40 acres.
Yes.
A mule from the Southern Army, the Confederate Army, mm-hmm. that was used by their soldiers. Mm-hmm. And not only that, they were to be given $100 apiece. That, the 40 acres and a mule, was to be divided amongst 18,000
people,
former slaves that mm-hmm. stayed in that Atlantic coast
yes.
region. Mm-hmm. Of course, we know that never happened because when Johnson took office after the assassination of Lincoln, that was repealed. That Special Order 15 was repealed. So that never took place.
Okay.
So those slaves, now you think about this is only 18,000 slaves that would have had an opportunity to take part of this. That never happened because that great experiment never took off, never had a chance to develop.
Right.
Then it did not, there was no model to set in place for the other 382,000
to follow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or it was actually 382 What was it? 3,082,000 slaves that was still left kind of dangling.
Yes.
Okay, so let's kind of fast forward from that point. Okay, so after that fails, the whole concept of the Freedmen Bureau is pretty much established, and is established for about a 10-year period, from roughly about 1870 to 1880. What the Freedmen's Bureau was to do was to establish self-sustaining communities for free African people. One thing that it focused on was establishing businesses in the community, establishing and creating agricultural systems amongst the people to be able to feed themselves, establishing handyman services and teaching.
Well, Brian, let me interject for a minute. How is it that some groups in certain populations of African Americans were able to sustain and to have those communities that were established like that on those bases, but then others were not?
Well, I think where you see the disparity is, you see the disparity between the North and the South.
Okay.
Okay. So the difference is that the Northern slaves had more opportunities than the Southern slaves, because the Northern slaves still worked up under the system of what I call indentured servitude.
Okay.
Okay.
I got you.
Whereas the Southern slaves worked under the system of oppression.
Oppression, yes.
Meaning that they were not indentured servants. They were considered to be solely 100% property.
Property, right.
And their labor was not compensated for. So the Northern slave at least could get some compensation, okay, after slavery. And even in some states, before slavery actually ended, as it relates to the Emancipation Proclamation.
Okay.
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 So that's why you see the great migration to when you see Southern slaves fleeing, they were fleeing north. Now, mostly when we talk about Underground Railroad, things of that nature, we have to understand that the Underground Railroad was isolated to a northern region. It wasn't Southern slaves actually being carried across states by Harriet Tubman. It was those slaves that were in the northern region that were actually being oppressed, that were seeking asylum and seeking freedom, and they would travel further north.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's what the Underground Railroad, as it relates to Harriet Tubman, that's what we talk about when we talk. So a lot of people think that, no, she was coming down south. She never came down south to free any slaves. Okay, there was a Underground Railroad south prior to the great Mother Harriet Tubman's movement. Okay, that was went from the coast of South Carolina into what we know as Spanish Florida.
Florida, yes,
okay,
that's correct.
The Spanish, we understand that history teaches us that if a slave could get to Florida, because it was a area of Spain, okay, then they would be free. That's right, up under Spanish law at that particular time. Okay. So that's just a short history of that.
So Brian, at this point, we've given, over the past 2.5 months that we've been doing these sessions, we have given basically a complete foundation of our history. And I think what a lot of people are searching and looking for now is, where do we go from here? What can we do now to help our children? Because the 40 acres and a mule, we've lost that. That's gone. I don't know if we could ever get that back if they ever did something pertaining to reparations. But right now, I'm looking at in the school systems, we're not preparing children. Some children get prepared at home that have financial steward, great parents that understand the financial piece, and they teach their children a great amount about finances. But when we take our children and we send them off to the schools, are they really teaching them how to manage in this society, how to take care of your monies, how to even manage even small amounts of money?
Well, let me interject. If you have no boots, you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. right?
Right.
Okay, that's how simple that is. So what we have to focus on, we have to understand as a people that economics play a major component when it comes to being able to function in society. That's why economics is suppressed in what we call or consider to be poverty areas. So we have to get back and understand that economics is a system that's set in place.
That's what I want.
Okay,
Yes.
by a racist government,
Right.
and by racist men at that time that wrote a constitution that left black people out. Period. Point blank. That's how simple that is. So we could stop right there and really understand the bulk of our problems comes from being left out of the equation as it relates to being considered citizens and being considered a valuable component as it relates to the enrichment of this country. Therefore, we never had entitlement rights to receive what our labor produced. All of that was taken away from us. So now, when we look at African communities today, when we look at African American communities, you cannot deal with the problem unless you go to the projects. You have to start in the projects. We have to start with the lowest of us. And we have to identify ourselves with the lowest of us if all of us are going to advance together. Okay, so we can't be on this kick as it relates to the black bourgeois that goes to college, gets educated,
Yes.
you know, may have grown up in a household where mama was a doctor, you know, and daddy was a lawyer, the Huxtables.
Yes.
Okay. they may have been fortunate enough, but the majority of us are not growing up like that. Why? Because systemically, the government has set in place laws, amendments, acts that deliberately leave a certain people group out of the equation.
Yes.
Now, so if they feel like, and number one, if we just look at the black man has been systematically targeted by the United States Constitution not to advance. So when we look at the problems of the black male, we have to go back to the origin of what the problems were. And the origin is that systematically we were left out of the equation. Systematically we were not factored in. Therefore, the black family suffered because the black male was not factored in as an important component of making this country grow and making this country successful, even though his labor was used. And that trickled down to the wife, it trickled down to the children, it trickled down to the next generation, so on and so forth. So we have to understand that there's a vital importance. Economics is the lifeblood of any community. Okay? Systemic racism is when you have a government that writes laws, amends laws, write bills, put in acts in place to not deal with the people that help produce the wealth
of this
country. Okay? And they purposely did that. Okay? So until we have to deal with that fact. We have to deal with the fact. So me going in a home or you going in a home, we can teach a person how to get on the 20-40-20 plan in a budget, which is a popular plan. Okay, but if they don't have any money in the bank, how can you budget in the 20-40-20 plan? You cannot do it. Like I said, if you don't have boots, you can't pull yourself up.
That's right.
By bootstraps that you don't have. So we got to go back and start dealing with the whole concept of retribution and reparations. Now, let me say this. Abraham Lincoln once the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, most people don't know this. He also signed another act that was put in place, and he paid the slave owners in the North for those slaves that had been freed. Okay? He put reparations in place for the slave owner who had lost property via the Emancipation and the Civil War. Yeah. So if their slaves went off and served in the Union Army, that act says we're going to pay you for the loss of your property, which was the slave that left home to go serve in the Union Army. Okay, after this emancipation, we're going to pay all northern slave holders retribution for the loss of their property, the slave, so that their wealth can continue and remain in the family growing strong. But yet you offer nothing for the slave that you so-called emancipated.
That's exactly right.
So we got to go back to the origin of where our problems started. And our problems start with a system that has been designed
for us to fail
and put in place for us to not achieve the status, social status of everyone that's equal to everyone else in this country. See, we're not asking to be above anyone else. We're asking to have the same
rights,
platform, level playing ground as everyone else.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. And in order to do that, you got to go back and deal with the fact that we were left out of the equation when it comes to the distribution of wealth in this country. And the way the government system is set up, the way the Constitution was set up, Dr. Claude Anderson says in his book, Black Labor, White Wealth, that 100% of the labor wealth of the slave was maldistributed into the hands of the slave owner.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So until you can rectify that, we're spinning our wheels. Like I said, it's hard to teach someone how to budget $4.25 an hour or $8 an hour. You understand what I'm saying? And this is the only thing that they have to make ends meet. Okay? It's hard to teach them how to put 10% away in savings when they don't have anything to save.
Exactly. That's right. Because it takes all of that just for them to meet their basic needs.
They're just trying to survive.
Yes.
Okay?
They are.
So how do you tell a person to put aside 10% of their income or 20% of their income should be going to savings so you can have a retirement account? That person is just thinking about where's my next meal coming from. Yes. Okay, so we have to level the playing field. We have to equalize the playing field. That's why.
You know, Brian, and now we're looking at it now, and that is great, but we gotta start. Should those reparations happen, something has to be put in place to educate our people as to how to manage that money, because you can give someone $1 million today and they may not have a dime of it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
If they don't understand the importance of budgeting. And this is, we're going to look at this. The people that got the $8.75 a week, a lot of people got that for unemployment since March 25th. And I just randomly asked several people, are you managing that? What are you doing with that? Are you going to be able to survive once they cut that off if you don't have your job back? A lot of people are not going to be able to make it because they're going to go back. If they go back into the workforce and they were only getting $300 or $400 a week versus getting $8.75, that's cutting them more than half. Some people, I had a lady tell me yesterday, well, that's part of your reparations right there.
No.
And I said, no, that's not.
Yeah, but it's still, we got to go back to the origin and the source of the problem. So even if the unemployment compensation, whatever they had it into the so-called
the CARES Act,
stimulus package.
Yes.
that they presented to where they boosted the unemployment for a certain
period of time.
Yeah, that's right. Even if that is cut out, that does not deal with the underlying problem. Okay, so you gave an analysis of you could take a person and give them $1 million, and the next day they'd be broke if they don't know what to do with the $1 million.
Exactly.
And that's perfectly understandable. But when you set something in place, when we talk about the fight for reparations, part of the fight for reparations is having a economic management tool in place with the reparations to help that person and those persons and us understand the value and the principle of what it is to have money. So most people don't understand what the use of money was intended for. The use of money was intended to establish wealth in a family so that future generations would not have to struggle and be treated unfairly up under a tyrannical system. Okay, so now that's putting it in simplistic terms. Okay,
Yes.
All right. So if we to establish something like that, these founding fathers were very smart as it relates to understanding how to cloak certain things into the Constitution to get everything that they wanted to have, and to make sure that the whole concept of white superiority and white supremacy maintained itself for thousands of years to come, hundreds of years to come. Okay?
Yes.
And how they cloaked that was by understanding that wealth had to remain, the majority of wealth had to remain with them and their children. In their descendants.
Yes.
That's why I have no problem when a white person, and I have many white friends, Caucasian friends, they'll come up to me and they'll say to me, well, Brian, I didn't enslave your people. And, we had nothing to do with that. And we are sympathetic and we apologize. And, I accept that. And I tell them, you are absolutely right. You didn't. But the system that was created for your ancestors, okay, to thrive, to survive, and to generate wealth.
Yes.
That system that they used to flourish, you're still using.
Exactly. And we still don't have.
Okay, you're still using the same system that was put in place. So the attack is not on you, and the attack is not on your ancestors, even though they were slave owners. The attack should be directed at the system that calls us 3/5 of a human, the system that declares its independence and yet leaves out the slave when the slave was here. It is the system that says that only a white man is entitled to certain privileges up under the rule of this government. It is the system that we have to attack. That's why reparations is so important. That's why it is needed, because it is part of the system that was established not to reward us for our labor. So we have to go after that. You understand?
Yes.
It's important for us to understand that. It's important to understand that I'm not so much concerned about black people. If we give them money, black people do the right thing. If you set tools in place to teach them how to manage the money, okay? That needs to be done by us. Because I've had a grandmother and a mother that could take $1 and feed us for 2 weeks.
That's right.
Understand, now, black people are good with money. We don't fall for the okie doke that we spend money as fast as we get it.
No, we don't.
But in our community, you could take black people, they can make $10.
Yes.
Last 3 weeks.
Don't give that to a black woman with children now. She can make it really straight.
So we don't really have a big issue like society want us to think. We are consumers, yes. Okay? But if something, if we set a tool in place that teaches us the value of distribution, the value of manufacturing, the value of understanding how to create generational wealth in our family, we can do it. I have that faith in us because we are, and this is statistically proven, the most, from when it comes to advancing out of slavery, there's no other people group, no other ethnic group in the world that has advanced as far as we have advanced in the last 150 to 200 years. And we did all of this basically with no assistance.
No assistance.
Okay? No help. Operating in a white supremacist system. And understand, when we say white supremacy, we're not talking about white people hating black people. That is not white supremacy.
No.
White supremacy is when you put in place a system whereby it is governed by wealth, where the person or persons that are under you have to depend on you in order to advance. And the government put in a system to where we have to depend
on them.
That's exactly right. In order to advance. And guess who runs the system?
They do.
Okay, so that's real simple. So that's why we call it white supremacy.
Right.
Because white men still are the majority that run that system. Okay? And we have to depend on them as it relates to laws, as it relates to whatever we need educationally, health-wise, and the system is broken. Okay? So now we have to attack those white supremacists that don't have hoods on. You understand?
Yes.
They have a suit and tie on.
Yes.
They call themselves congressmen and senators.
Exactly.
You understand?
Yes.
They call themselves the Supreme Court, which is also the root word of supremacy. Okay?
Yes.
So you understand?
Yes.
Which is run and have been run for the majority of its inception by white men. You understand?
So Brian, what about the great leaders that we have? We've lost quite a few in the past few weeks. We've lost 2 or 3 within the past 3 months or so. So we are looking for someone, and we're expecting our leaders now that are in these positions, that are in Congress, that are in the Senate, to pick up that mantle and do something. You know, this is we're past the civil rights issues. I believe that. We got to get past that. We're fighting a whole different fight right now.
Let me tell you, the civil rights issues are dead at this moment because everybody have picked up the civil rights flag.
Yes.
And is waving that flag, and they're calling it, oh, me too. Me too. I'm included in this. If I'm persons of color, I'm included. If I'm gay, I'm included. If I'm lesbian, I'm included.
If I'm Hispanic, I'm included. Everybody.
There is no more civil rights issues to discuss as it relates to black people. So let me specify that. Okay.
Okay.
And nothing against any of those groups that we just highlighted. What we're saying is civil rights. The intention of the Civil Rights Act was to address black people that were descendants of slaves that had been prohibited certain rights up under the Constitution. And the 13th, 14th Amendment that did not address some of those rights, the Civil Rights Act looked to correct that. It never did.
It never did.
So we're not, it's not a battle about civil rights anymore. We have to take up the mantle from a different perspective. And we have to concentrate and focus on what your shirt says. What is a black life now?
Yes.
You understand? That still needs to be defined. Okay? And what is the essential core that we address as it relates to that black life? Okay? So if that black life is a single mother, if that black life doesn't matter what category they fall in, how do we address that if they are a descendant of a slave and they have been systematically left out of this program that we call America and that this corporation that we call America, up under the bylaws that we call the Constitution, if they have been systematically left out of that, how do we correct that to include them so that they get the same thing that everyone else that was a citizen was given under those laws? Okay? So if that means equal pay, we have to address that. If that means getting out of decrepit schools, we have to address that.
Yes.
If that means getting good health care, we have to address that. All of those things we have to address because they're part of the broken and failed system.
Yes.
Okay? So we have to address those things. So now when we look at leaders, and you're talking about John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, yes, some of our great African American civil rights leaders that were on the front line, they're transitioning and they're becoming ancestors. But we now have to pick up the mantle, I think, collectively. There cannot be just one voice crying out in the night. There has to be all voices that cry out in the night. So from my sisters and brothers that's in the project, I do not isolate myself from them. I am their voice. They have to be my voice. We have to speak with one voice. We all should be saying the same thing as it relates to the issues concerning justice, concerning healthcare, all of these things that they're naming that the system has failed us
Yes.
in. We all have to speak with one voice and let the government know we want to be repaid. We want to be repaired. Repaired is a part of reparation.
Restored.
We want to be restored.
Yes. Yes.
The only way to make that right is to give us what you promised us to start with.
And what you
we
stole
hold,
from us.
We hold you accountable to restore to us the wealth of our ancestors that they never saw. The children deserve it. We need it. Because there's no other way you're going to fix crime in the African.
No.
And I still maintain that part of black on black crime is a design to destroy black men by way of the government. Now we can go into that. That's a whole another discussion,
yes.
But it's a needed discussion that we need to have.
Yes.
And to understand why we see some of the crimes being committed by our young black men. And we need to understand their psychology as it relates to being in situations that they're in and being put in
that environment.
Yes, environments that are not conducive.
Yes.
To actually prosper or to even live.
Exactly.
Okay, and our children are growing up in those environments as well. So we have to address that economic issue, and we have to address the issue of reparations. And we do that by not being silent, by continuing to cry out aloud, we need money, period. That is going to take away 75% of our problems.
Yes, it will.
Now the other 25%, we can instruct, teach, and manage through that.
Yes, we can.
Okay, but until we deal with that issue and create a foundation where we as a community can stand, we as a community can sustain itself, then after you do that, after you create that foundation, then you could talk about self-love, see, and getting out of the mindset of self-hate. Yeah, we see that tossed around in the political arenas a lot. Well, self-hate is, we see the byproduct of self-hate is our black men killing each other, shooting each other down. So now we can deal with, once you lay a good foundation economically, now we can deal with the whole equation of self-love. We can deal with the whole equation of creating businesses and reestablishing jobs and then putting our children to work. We can deal with all of those things, okay? But until we are at that place, then we don't need to be talking about anything else but the bill has come due.
Yes.
And the government need to pay the bill that's come due. That's how simple that is.
So it's left up to us to put the people in place to get out and vote. This is on a local level.
Yes.
We vote for our representatives, our Congress, our Senate. We have the determining factor to put the right people in those positions and demand that they...
Let's talk about this next week. Let's
Okay.
talk about going beyond the vote. Okay. I don't minimize voting. I encourage everyone to vote. But if you put the black bourgeois in office, and I have to talk about the black bourgeois, but somebody need to call them out because they get in these positions.
Yes.
And they dinker along, and they say the same thing that the last politician that was their counterpart, Caucasian, left out saying, I'm for all the people. And I'm a mayor of all the people. I'm a senator of all the people. Okay, see, that's what the black bourgeois do.
Yes.
Well, if the Caucasian mayor is in there, he is saying, no, I'm here to support the interests of my people. Because you are in the city, you are included in that. But my interest is for my people. See, black folk have a problem. We want to cater to, and Dr. Carter G. Woodson said this in The Miseducation of the Negro, we cater to everything else but our interests. And we pander, we tinkerbell around, you understand? Try to play niceties with everybody when people aren't playing nice with us. See, they'll tell you, no, the interest with the people that put me in, that's who I support.
That's who I support.
Every senator that you've seen campaign is a Trump supporter, and they'll tell you,
and they don't hide it.
We want to build the wall, we want to do this, we want to support the interests of those that are putting us in office. We're the only people that gets in office and say, oh, we want to satisfy all the people. No. The mantra should be, I'm going to take care of the interests of my people. And because you live in this city, you are included in that. But the first is my people. That's where my first priority is going. You understand?
Yes, yes.
Now, just like we've been experiencing trickle-down economics all of our lives, and we've been in a depression since we came over here in 1619, okay? Now is your opportunity to experience the same trickle down, but they're going to be okay because they have on their side what we refer to as white privilege. You understand? So they can flourish in the system. They're never going to be completely isolated like we have been. And they're always going to have opportunities that we don't have because of the system. So we have to have leadership now that's not afraid to say, and not only that, that can educate our white counterparts and let them know, look, I don't fault you, my brother, but this is not about you. This is about a system that have diametrically opposed my people for over 400 years.
Me and my people.
You see what I'm saying?
That's right.
So we have to establish that.
Wow.
You know, if we do that, then we can start making a pathway toward being compensated and receiving the reparations of our ancestors that they never got. Okay? And we'll do that. The bill is due. And that's what Dr. King, prior to his assassination, one of his last speeches, he says before he gives his last sermon dealing with the Poor People's Campaign, he says, I'm going to the government now, and I'm taking a blank check that they're going to have to cash. Because now it is about restoring an economic base to my people. He understood that integration didn't solve any problems at all. Matter of fact, it created problems. Okay? But he had the foresight at the end of his journey to recognize, and he said that maybe I've led my people into a burning house that cannot be saved. So he began to understand the complexities of the issues, and it was deeper than me sitting at a counter eating lunch with a person that's the opposite persuasion. It wasn't never about that. This was about justice as it relates to the maldistribution of wealth to the white owners and their children for hundreds of years and thousands of years as if this American empire continued to exist. We need to get that money back. You understand? So, all right, sweetheart.
Wow. Well, I thank you all for joining us today. That was, I'm learning along with you. A lot of this, I'm not a history major and I don't profess to be, but I am learning as I go, and it is awesome to actually listen and hear and read. I mean, it is amazing, and we so need this. If we don't, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. We're going to have to all come together and demand what we want. And the people that we're putting in these positions now, we're voting a lot of mayors in. We're voting senators. We're voting Congress. We got to get out and demand, tell them this is what we want. This is what we're asking. If you want my vote, this is what you must do for us. And we got to have the people in place that are not afraid to go up and challenge them on that. So, enough of the okie doke. Time out for that. So until next Sunday, it's going to get even better. But I'm going to do a watch party after this. And I challenge you to share with as many people as possible. Because we're not going to be silent any longer. Okay? Love you guys. Have a blessed week. And until next Sunday, we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.